Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special edition of the Tribble Timewarp, in which we will be redoing the Eriksson raid in a Volkov that could be charitably described as a rolling junk heap. You can see the build here, and if you want to see the ship fit, if you really want to see the full horror, I suggest you rewind and pause. It's pretty obvious that this thing is not a great fitted ship. Actually, it was cobbled together out of parts that I had left over at the beginning of Season 2. Anyway, some people have been claiming that the Eriksson secondary objective is too hard, and that people don't have the DPS to kill the freighters, that the freighters are too tough. I don't agree. But I decided to try it anyway, so I, as you can see, dusted off the old carrier and decided to give it a go. So, tactically, basically this is fairly obvious from the off if you've done this mission even once. I commented on it in my original look at the Eriksson system, which you can find elsewhere on my channel. Yes, the key thing here is that you either need a load of DPS to kill the freighters before they get to their jump point, or you need a way of slowing the freighters down to buy you the time if you haven't got the DPS output. So, in this case, I'm in a Volkov, I've only got 6 weapons plus the birds of prey, so gravity well and target subsystem engines play quite a big part here. And yeah, don't even try and go for all 3 waves of freighters, you will fail. It is virtually guaranteed. Anyway, as I said, there have been calls for nerfs to the freighters on this mission, and I'm hoping this video is going to persuade Cryptic that the nerfs really aren't needed. Because I am not a god amongst starship captains, I really am not. Although, apparently I'm better than some. Here's the thing. Do you want STO to be a bit of a challenge? Do you want players to be stretched, to be pushed, to be challenged, to improve? Because if that's the case, then giving them something that is doable but not trivial, like this objective, is the way to go. It will make better players. The alternative is, yes, to nerf the content. To say, okay, we will weaken the freighters, we will make it so that a Volkov's baseline DPS output is sufficient to disable 2 freighters, regardless of what you do by way of movement, or escorts, or tactics, or strategy. And that would be a shame. It really would. It would be hand-holding. The players would not get any better. Those that are failing this particular secondary, which I actually find it hard to believe people are failing here. Will you stop moving? Thank you. But the problem is that in that case, all you do is you create a lazy player base. For one thing, they will consider themselves continually entitled to this. If something is too hard, they will just whine for nerfs again. And again, and again, and again. And the second thing is that they won't improve. Now, I will concede that this may be a bug. The freighter is self-repaired to 100%, and is, I don't know how far, I think we're about 3-4 kilometres from the nav buoy at this point, so some rapid and focused DPS was needed. Very quickly beam over. Very quickly, in fact, because not half a second later, yeah, over-enthusiastic AI birds of prey. Can we have a look at IFF for torpedoes in flight? Because presumably the freighter was shot at when it was hostile, but went friendly in the interim. So ideally the torpedoes should deactivate and the damage should register. I have no idea how STO is measuring friendly and hostile status for weapon attacks that are delayed, like torpedo salvos, but yeah, is it possible to say If you are friendly when the attack hits, it doesn't count regardless of what your IFF status was when the weapon was actually launched at you. Just a thought, I have no idea how hard this would be to code. Anyway, back onto the topic of a lazy, entitled player base. Yeah. So, if players aren't stretched, they won't improve. If they don't improve, then when you do chuck content at them that's a little more difficult than kill 5 packs, say in the STFs or the weekly episodes, then they're going to fail horribly. Now, if they're failing solo, I don't care. I really do not care. They could be barely capable of getting out of space dock without scratching the paint, because they're not going to seriously knock onto my game experience. But this is a multiplayer game. It's not always going to be that way. It is going to be the case that I am going to find myself with these players in PvP. I'm going to find myself quite possibly grouping with them. And God forbid I try and do a pickup group in an STF or a fleet action, because, yeah, this kind of thing is what leads to pickup groups getting a bad name. Can you imagine it? Just imagine if you had somebody, if you fail, not because you were bad, if you were playing a perfect mission, but because someone else in your team wasn't up to the mark. So the whole team fails. 4 competent players get done in by an incompetent one. And that is something I would prefer not to see. It's going to happen. We all know it. But, yeah. I don't know. Just keep some challenge to the missions, please. Just don't nerf this. It really does not need it at all. Anyway, back onto the mission. Second wave of the freighters obviously starts to move as soon as you blow the second power conduit, so I positioned myself. I knew this, I thought ahead, I used some tactics. It is a cunning thing. It doesn't matter that freighter's repaired, because obviously I've already pillaged it. Fortunately, it doesn't matter, because one of my birds of prey actually kills it and goes chasing away. So we're free to focus on the last freighter. Gravity well out again to stop it running, hammer through the aft shields, disable it, turn their attention to the trident, etc, etc. This is... No, this isn't a challenge. As I said, I am just stunned that people are failing this secondary objective. I could understand failing the timed DPS objectives in this ship, because the Volkuv is not a DPS class, it's not a DPS design, and a brutal, straight, unmitigated DPS check like a hard timer, such as you get in the Kern system, was always going to be difficult or impossible. And that's to be expected, because if they make it possible for Volkuv, they'll trivialise it for a specialised DPS class like the Birds of Prey or the Raptors or the Escorts. So here's a question. How far do Cryptic specialise their mission design? Do we say that every mission has to be completely doable in a ship of any class, because that is going to severely limit the mission design? Or are we happy to say, well, okay, this secondary objective is going to be a brutal DPS check. If you're not in a DPS ship, you're not going to be able to pull it off. Go and switch into a bird of prey. You can switch, why won't you? Loot the final freighter. Equally, you could have endurance objectives where you have to stay in the fight and take a certain amount of damage for a certain time. A bird of prey won't be able to do that, but a Volkuv or a Nekvar will. So, hey, right tool for the right job. Basic, elementary design. Anyway, that is that. I shall see you next time.